Cashew here with the DMV.
Has concluded.
The DMVSTREAM.COM.
Sean Parker along with Nick Allison.
I always wanted to play volleyball in college.
Cordova trying to dig it out of the board. And they score!
Hello and welcome to the Prep Zone. I'm your host, Matt Present. Brent Randolph here from DMV Stream. And we're going to get a special guest a little later in the show. That is the head coach of Thomas Jefferson High School, Mark Gray Mendez. But first, Brenton, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good, man. We've got some state championships to talk about, and two of them were very competitive. One of them was a bit of a runaway, but it's a huge accomplishment by all 6 of these teams just to make it to this point, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
All right, so you hit on a couple of games we'll be discussing today. We got some basketball as well for you later in the show as we take a look at what's upcoming, what's on the agenda. Those football games you mentioned, the 4A state title with Wise and Quince Orchard, that in Maryland, Virginia. It was the 6A final between Westfield and Oscar Smith. And then back north of the Mason-Dixon line, Damascus and Franklin. We also have some basketball, H.D. Woodson and Theodore Roosevelt, and Paul VI and O'Connell as well. Here's how to find us. Of course, you've found us already, I'm sure, at DMVSTREAM.COM, live on Facebook. And then we're on local TV as well. So if you haven't found us yet, here's how to get with us for our next show a week from today. And before we get into the show a little further, I'm going to step aside and let BJ Kubarulis tell you how to get your play featured on our Top 10 Countdown.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to an all-new season of Top Plays here at OleMetSports.com and WashingtonPost.com. I'm your host, BJ Kubarulis. Now, as we've done the past 4 seasons, we're continuing our exciting interactive high school football show that allows you, the coaches, players, parents, and fans, and others, to send in your video submissions for ranking in our Top 10 style weekly show. If you want to see your highlight in this show, well, it's as simple as tweeting your boy. I'm at BJ Koob, and you got to remember to hashtag it, Ole Mets. All right, you can tweet in your Huddle, YouTube, Vimeo, really any video link by Sundays at noon, and we'll consider it for use in the upcoming episode of Top Plays. Now, you got to remember to tune in on Mondays to see if your video made our Top 10 at OleMetSports.com. We'll see you soon.
Welcome back to the Prep Zone. You know, Brendan, sometimes they say we'll save the best for last. Not in this case. We're going to start right off with the best state championship, the 6A final in Virginia. It was Westfield against Oscar Smith for the 2nd straight year, and for 2 years straight, it has ended in dramatic fashion.
That's right, Matt. I mean, Westfield and Oscar Smith, it's a rematch for these two teams, and Westfield last season came out on top in triple overtime. This time, the game would only go into double overtime. Ooh, but Westfield obviously had a huge season this year. They had a bit of a struggle there in the middle. They lost a couple games to Stonebridge and Briarwoods, but they've really come on of late, and Ramon Johnson has been the guy. There he hits, I believe, Kevin Petrillo for a deep pass, and Ramon Johnson just had a huge game, had his best game in his final game as a senior. He found Nolan Cockrell for Westfield's first touchdown of the game. Normally you see him hitting his favorite targets like Sean Eckert or maybe Ivory Frimpong, but Nolan Cockrell had a huge part in this game. Like I mentioned earlier, he likes to find Sean Eckert. He found Sean Eckert for that touchdown. That put Westfield up 14-7. And Westfield's defense is another huge strength for this team, and it's been a huge strength for them throughout their dominant run these past 2 seasons, as they were able to get up on Oscar Smith 21-7 thanks to that Nathaniel Chung touchdown. But Oscar Smith, give them some credit. They came back to take a lead against them, and Westfield came back and was able to pull it out in double overtime thanks to another touchdown to Nolan Cockrell and a huge goal line stand, just like last season.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned the defense. You got to give them credit. 4th and 3, and they get it done to hold on to that victory. Now, you mentioned Ramon Johnson in the game. He had 14 of 26 passing for 221 yards, 4 touchdowns, including that go-ahead score in double overtime. But we would be remiss if we didn't mention the quarterback on the other side of things, Sean Mitchell. He threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's the all-time state leader in completions, yards, and touchdowns. So really a great quarterback matchup, a phenomenal game, and a double overtime victory.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely huge. And like you said, for that quarterback for Oscar Smith, to be able to carve apart Westfield's defense like that, especially late, is a huge accomplishment for him and for the Oscar Smith Tigers. They've got nothing to hang their heads upon. But for Ramon Johnson, he had a huge playoffs, not just in this game, but overall. He threw for 11 touchdowns in the playoffs, throughout the playoffs, and he had, I believe, 4 touchdowns in the previous game against South Lakes as well. So there were people who were maybe questioning Westfield's offense, saying, well, you know, could they do it again? Could they pull it out? But Ramon Johnson certainly quieted those people and answered that question, I would say.
Well, back-to-back titles for Westfield. That's going to be a theme as we move along, as we get into the Maryland side of things, and we start in 3A with Damascus and Franklin. Damascus looking for back-to-back titles.
That's right. Damascus was looking for back-to-back titles, and they were going up against Franklin, but there was a little bit of added extra motivation for Damascus coming into this game despite being the state champion, because as Mark Giannato mentioned in a previous episode of the Prep Zone, Franklin beat Damascus in heartbreaking fashion. But Damascus came to play, and their defense certainly came to play. They forced a whole bunch of turnovers, including this fumble recovery, as well as 3 interceptions. So 4 interceptions, I should say. They were huge in this game, and normally they're known for running with their running back Marcus Vinson, but they were able to throw for a touchdown here, as you just saw. And this was just a competitive game throughout the entire game, and Franklin kept it close, but they ultimately weren't able to pull it out as Damascus went on and got the victory 14-12.
Yeah, and you mentioned those turnovers, the 4 interceptions. They also had a blocked field goal. 3 times they forced turnovers on downs, a fumble as well. So that's really what led to this. But also give Franklin credit. You mentioned Vincent. He needed 93 yards to get to 2,000 for his career, and Franklin held him in check. He didn't get there. Right.
I mean, they held him. They had, what, I believe 24 carries for 69 yards. So that's a huge day for Franklin's defense. And we'll talk a little bit about the player of the game for Damascus, Colby Starheim. I mentioned they had a whole slew of interceptions. He had 3 of them. So that's just a huge day for him in the secondary, because when you get those 3 interceptions, I mean, that just kills momentum when you're talking about Franklin. I mean, those are potential drive-saving interceptions, and without those plays, Damascus probably doesn't win this game.
No, and that's unbelievable. And you alluded to the fact that Franklin beat Damascus in heartbreaking fashion. That was in 2014. That was the last loss for Damascus. Back-to-back state titles, 28-0 the past 2 seasons. Their last regular season loss, you have to go back to 2013 against Quince Orchard early in the season. So Damascus, certainly you can call them a dynasty as you look at their point differential, and over the past 4 years, 50-3 their record.
I mean, you're entering like video game numbers at this point, because I mean, you just look at those point differentials. I think one of them was over 500. I mean, that's just insane. I've never even heard of stats like that. And I mean, 50-3 over the past 4 seasons, that's difficult to do no matter what league you're in, like no matter what high school, no matter what county. 50-3 is just, I mean, it is what it is, and you've got to respect it. So congrats to Damascus on being such a dominant team over the past 4 years.
All right, so we got 2 back-to-back champions. Could we get 3? It's the 4A state final in Maryland, Wise against Quince Orchard.
Oh yeah, could we get 3? We definitely got 3, because Wise has been undefeated just like Damascus these past 2 seasons, and they haven't had too much competition either. As you saw John Oliver get the first rushing touchdown of the game for Wise, and then they're going to hand it off to him once again. He goes right up the gut and gets past the Quince Orchard defense with pretty easily. And when you talk about Wise, you've got to talk about their quarterback, Jabari Laws. He's been tearing it up all season long, and this state championship game was no different, as he threw for 4 touchdowns and only had 3 incomplete passes. So Wise was just completely dominant in this game. Maybe came by a little bit of a surprise to some, because Quince Orchard had been having such a great season themselves. Their only loss was to a team we mentioned earlier in Damascus, but Wise did what they always do, and that was just basically come out, score a whole bunch of touchdowns early, kind of demoralize their opponents, and then finish them off with some big touchdowns late, like this long pass to Dimitri Morsell. So just an incredible performance by Wise, and again, back-to-back state champions for 3 teams here.
Right, and like you said, anytime you throw more touchdowns than you have incompletions, you're doing something right. As we
It's
look
an incredible
at
day.
Jabari Law's numbers on the day, 15 for 18, 276, and those 4 TDs Brenton mentioned. I think the other thing, you talked about how Wise demoralized Quince Orchard. Their defense forced 3 first-half turnovers. That had to play a part in this demoralizing of Quince Orchard, holding them to just 7 points.
Right, and like you said, it was demoralizing because when you just get stopped like that, and when you give the ball back to a team like Wise that just scores and scores and scores and keeps scoring, it's just, it's killer for them. And it's something that Wise has done all season. They did it in the state semifinal game against Howard as well. So they've won all their games by like double digits, and they've just been killing people. So it's great for them.
So 3 teams with back-to-back state titles. The football season now behind us. But we're going to relive it just a little bit as we take a look at the top scenes from the 2016 season. Welcome back to the Prep Zone. 3 great football games we just talked about, but then another great game as well. Last night, a top 10 basketball game. Paul VI and O'Connell and Brenton, you were there.
That's right, I was there, and this was a great game just by 2 of the top teams in the area and a big-time WCAC rivalry. And the game went into overtime, but early in the game, Brandon Slater was the guy that got Paul VI going as he hit 3 huge threes, and he was looking at the crowd and getting them pumped up. But Bishop O'Connell, give them some credit, they certainly tried to come back, and they fought as hard as they possibly could, led by their guard, Xavier Johnson. And for Paul VI, they just, their guard play was the key in this game, as it was Jeremy Roach, it was Brandon Slater, and those guys were just playing a great game for Paul VI. and they had a huge buzzer-beating shot from close to half court that put them up 11 at halftime. But again, O'Connell just kept fighting back. They hit a couple of threes, and then you're going to see this big putback dunk there that gave them a lot of momentum, and they briefly took the lead late in the fourth quarter. But again, their guards for Paul VI had a huge game, and Jeremy Roach led the way for them in the fourth quarter as well as in overtime, as Paul VI was able to come away with that 62-58 victory.
And Roach, just a freshman, so really exciting to see him doing what he's doing, leading the team at the end of the game, making a shot with just 20 seconds left, and really carrying the load at the end.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the coach for Paul VI, Glenn Farello, has got to be excited about his freshman, because when you see freshmen, it was the first big test of the season for Paul VI, and when you see your freshman being the guy to step up and lead the way, including the game-winning shot with 20 seconds left and 13 total points, that's something that you've got to be looking forward to when you're the coach. You have 4 years of that. I mean, I'd sign up for it.
Absolutely. We'll be talking more hoops in just a bit as Mark Gray Mendez joins us after the break. Welcome back to the Prep Zone here on DMV Stream, and in our weekly Fast Forward segment, the head coach of Thomas Jefferson High School, Mark Gray Mendez, takes his time to sit down with us. Coach, how's the season going so far?
Not too bad. I like our group. We have an experienced group coming back this year. Most of the guys that are getting minutes for us were on the team last year, and they took their lumps, but they've gained a lot of good experience from that time they spent. And we got off to a pretty good start this year. First week of the season was very positive for us. It's been a little bit of a rough patch lately. Been dealing with some injuries and some other issues, but we'll be back on the right foot, and I'm looking forward to getting into the holiday season.
All right, we'll get back to you in just a moment, but first, we just talked about Paul VI and their overtime win last game. Now let's preview their next game with Brenton here, who will break down their upcoming match with St. John's.
That's right, Paul VI and St. John's. These are two of the top teams in the WCAC. Paul VI currently ranked second in the Washington Post top 20, and St. John's is the defending WCAC champion. So I'd expect this one to be a very interesting and fun game to be at. If you don't have anything left to do, you definitely should come out and go watch that game. I would definitely recommend it. And when you talk about Paul VI, you've got to talk about their guards. And in particular, I want to highlight their freshman guard, Jeremy Roach, who in the game last night against Bishop O'Connell finished with 13 points, but most of those points came in the fourth quarter, and he came up with some huge plays for Paul VI. And on the other side of things, when you go to St. John's, they've got 3 players who are averaging double digits this season, and they're led by their guard, Reese Mona. So you want to make sure that you look out for the guards both on the Paul VI side and on the St. John's side in this one. It should be a very fun matchup.
Yeah, like you said, certainly an enticing one. Paul VI, 5-0 on the season. Meanwhile, St. John's, they're winners of 4 straight. That's Saturday at 3 p.m. We'll be right back with a couple of Virginia previews, but first, a quick break. Hey guys, Matt Present here with this week's Coach's Corner. This week we talked to Lake Braddock's Brian Metris about how he likes to create mismatches within his offense.
Okay, so one of the things we like to do is we like to post our guards. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll come down the court, and our guard will throw the ball to a forward, and our center will come up and set a screen for him. He can cut either way off that screen, and right there we like to try to post our guards up. And if we don't get the post up, our centers will pop out. We'll throw the ball right up here to our centers, and if they can shoot the ball a little bit, we'll let them shoot it. If they can't really shoot it, we tell them don't shoot it. But sometimes that's a wide open shot, because if the big guy switches onto our guard, then all of a sudden we have maybe a bigger guy shooting over to a little guy. And then if that doesn't work, what we'll usually do is the center's now up here. He's got the ball, and the forward, he threw him the ball, and the guard's down here posting, and then we'll come down here and kind of screen for that guard, and then that guard will come off. Again, if they switched it, that would be a center having to get through that screen and cover a guard on the perimeter. So now if we catch the ball there, we can shoot it if he doesn't get out fast enough, and if the center gets out real fast, then we can drive against him and get to the basket, because we have a quicker guy driving against a bigger guy. Meanwhile, while that's going on, our forward can now post up also. Just a little thing we like to do. We like to do this for Quentin. Corey comes up with our guards, because as they come down the court, they can shoot it, they can get a layup off of a cut, they can post up, they get the ball off a down screen, they can drive it. Gives them lots of options. What we have to do is teach them how to use those options.
Welcome back, and thanks to Coach Mitras for joining us here on the Prep Zone. We continue with our weekly fast forward segment and turn to Virginia hoops. Annandale and Marshall going at it this Thursday. Coach, what should we expect from this matchup?
Well, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think I'm going to go check it out because we're off that night. A couple of my favorite coaches out there, Coach Bainey at Annandale, Coach Hale at Marshall. And what you're going to see is really a coach's dream because you have two totally contrasting styles. Annandale's going to bring a lot of firepower from the guard position. They're going to bring, the guy up on the screen right there is Dante Johnson. He's a 4-year varsity player for them. I remember when they came over to our place a few years ago, he walked in as a freshman and he looked the part. He was ready to be a varsity player on day one. That was early in the season. He started for them and he brings just a wealth of experience to the table. They also have another couple of great guards, Jordan Adams, who can light it up from anywhere. He's a senior this year. And guard Matt McIver is a really lightning quick, just savvy player, real good transition guard. And Annandale looks to push the tempo. Marshall, meanwhile, is more of sort of a big bruising team. They bring two guys. You can see Jordan James right there, 6'7", a real long, athletic forward who would be a center on most teams in the Northern Virginia area. But he brings a dynamic blend of athleticism and length. And I like to look at him kind of as their shutdown corner in a way, as if he were on a football team. They play a lot of zone, and whichever side of the floor he's on, he can take care of pretty much by himself because of the ability he has to cover a lot of ground. But Marshall pairs him with 6'10" center Jack Foley, who's another big, really intimidating presence in there. We had them last night, and they were really able to suffocate us with their zone. And it was a long night for us, but you're going to see really two different styles there. And if the game's in the 60s or the 70s, I think I probably like Annandale. If the game's in the 40s, I like Marshall. So getting an eye on that game is going to be really, really interesting.
You mentioned defending a guy of 6'10" stature. How do you go about it? Is it double teams, or is there another way you look to take him out of the play?
There are a lot of different things that you can do to defend a post player. You can try to front him, make them throw a lob pass. He's a big kid, so tough to stop that. You can play behind and then look to double team, but they've got a lot of good shooters out there. Ryan Robinson at the guard position. Joseph Lampman is another kid who can knock down shots for them, and a number of others. So they do a great job of pairing those big guys with a number of others who can spread the floor and make you pay for what you decide to do with them in the post. It's going to be an interesting night, and whoever it is that's trying to double is going to have to close out hard on the next guy in line. So it's going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
All right, that's Thursday night. There's also a good matchup on Friday night, Yorktown and Madison. What should we expect here?
A great Liberty Conference matchup between two really well-coached teams. Kevin Roller at Madison is a good friend of mine, and I used to coach against him when he was at McLean and we were in the Liberty District, so I've had a lot of experience with him. Coach Roller really likes to push the tempo. Again, he's going to go, in a lot of cases, going to go 5 guards on the floor. Sometimes they play a lineup that doesn't have a guy above 6 feet or 6'1". They like to shoot the 3, but they love to spread the floor and penetrate and kick out, and they're really a tough cover. And meanwhile, Yorktown, coached by Joe Reed, a guy who used to be at Bishop Ireton, he runs a lot of tremendous sets. They've got a great senior scorer, Connor Van Kirk, who's about 5'11", 6-foot guard, and he knows how to get himself open, and he's lights out when he catches it. So Madison's going to have to figure out a way to ratchet up the tempo, and that's something that they really enjoy doing. So again, another contrasting style kind of a game. It seems like we're on a theme here, but those are going to be two real good ones. And Madison, Yorktown, it's going to come down to the last possession is my guess. Madison just had one of those last night against Hayfield. Johnny Korish, this guy that we're going to talk about here in a minute, had a great dish off at the last second to John Finney to make a layup to win that ball game. So that's going to be a good one.
So we had Alex Harris in here last week. He broke down Johnny Korish, but I want to get your perspective because everyone is going to have their own take. Everyone's going to point out different things. What about Johnny makes him such a tough guard?
To me, it's his versatility. It's the number of different things that he can do on the court. He can knock down an open shot, he can penetrate, and he can create for others. You see his stat line right there. One of the things that he does better than just about any guard that I've seen is he goes to the glass. He can go up and get his own shot. He can put back an offensive rebound. And he's deceptively athletic. You take a look at him and you think, okay, maybe, just another guy. But then he can get up off 2 feet, and you see him working in practice on tossing it to himself and then going up and throwing it down. It kind of opens your eyes like, whoa, this kid's an athlete. But he's great in transition, great in the half court, great in the ball screen game. He just has so many different ways that he can beat you. So trying to game plan for him becomes really difficult.
All right, so we've talked about a couple enticing upcoming matchups, but let's back up a little bit, look at the bigger picture here. Who are some really good teams that you look to be, contenders down the stretch that you're going to face this year, or even broader in the state of Virginia?
If you talk about the 6A North region, is kind of what I'm most familiar with. I think there are a lot of really, really good teams that are having great early seasons. I always look at the Patriot Conference as being one that's really strong. You look at them from top to bottom last year. Annandale was the number 8 seed last year in the Patriot, and they almost took out the number 1 seed. So they're going to be obviously a strong team. The two favorites, I think, in that conference will be West Potomac and Woodson. West Potomac brings a great combination of inside-outside play. They have Khalil Williams-Diggins at the point guard position, and he's another guy who can beat you inside and outside. Sophomore guard Daryl Mackey Jr., who's another kid who's just lightning quick and gives them a lot of different dimensions. And they have a post player by the name of Iderset Ekpuk, who they call Surge, and he's just a warrior down there. Again, great in the ball screen game, goes after the glass like nobody else. I think they're going to be a really, really tough team to beat. Woodson is always going to be really well coached. Doug Craig does a tremendous job out there. They've got Jason Agner, who's just one of the most lights out knockdown shooters you're going to find. They've got point guard Matt Urbach, who came in as a transfer this past year, and they just bring a lot of different dimensions to their game. Point guard Simon Mullah is another guy who's really dynamic and fun to watch. So Woodson will obviously be somebody you have to look at. Then you got Chantilly, coached by Jim Smith. They'll be excellent. They've had a great start to their season. In the Liberty Conference, you look at a team like South Lakes, and they bring a lot of guys off the bench that are tremendous, but you look at their starting lineup. Emmanuel Aguirre is a tremendous force in the post. Marcus Cherry, I think, has had 30 points a couple games already this season. So I think the 6A North region is going to be really fascinating. There's going to be a lot of good teams, and that Final Four is going to be must-see TV. If you look at 5A, that's where we are in our conference. I think Wakefield is going to be outstanding again this year. Coach Tony Bentley does a wonderful job. They're going to pick you up and press full court. They've got great guard combination, senior Alan Treacle and senior Halil Parks. Those guys were both first-team all-conference last year, and they're going to be just outstanding for them also. And they bring back a number of other players that have a lot of experience. And Coach Bentley does a wonderful job with his system. Potomac down south in Dumfries is going to be one to watch. Keith Honore, another just outstanding coach, multiple state championships. I think the 5A region is really loaded with some hot talent this year too. So I'm looking forward to it. As a coach, you almost want to be able to step back and go see more of these games because we're always playing on Tuesday and Friday nights. You end up missing a lot of these really quality teams to go see. But any chance you get, like I said, tomorrow night I'm going to be at Annandale and Marshall just getting my fix, looking forward to it.
Well, a couple of those teams you mentioned were on that top 20 graphic that we saw, HD Woodson and Chantilly. Brendan, you also have gotten out and caught a few basketball games this season. Who's impressed you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the teams coach also mentioned it was South Lakes. I saw them play in their big rivalry game against Herndon, and like you said, Marcus Cherry had 30 points in that game, and that's a young team that had a bunch of players that were sophomores and even freshmen like Cam Savage starting last season, and they're a really young team, and they said they wanted to get a little bit better defensively, and if they can do that, I think that's one of the teams that I would look to as one of the teams that's going to be really dangerous this season, and even going into the future, because even though Marcus Cherry is going to be graduating, they're still going to have the majority of their roster coming back next season. So they're going to be a team that you definitely want to keep your eye on.
All right, so we got you covered this week. A game Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We've previewed them all. Coach, thanks for joining us on our weekly Fast Forward. That's going to do it here for us on DMV Stream. Until next week, for Mark Gray Mendez and Brenton Randolph, I'm Matt Present. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Prep Zone.